Beloved brothers and sisters, today I stand before you with a trembling heart, not because of fear, but because of the weight of a message that Jesus himself placed upon me. Many of us have heard about speaking in tongues. We have seen it, we have practiced it, we have debated it. But Jesus told me something very clear: speaking in tongues is not what you think. When the Lord speaks, he does not speak to entertain us. He does not speak to confuse us. He speaks to bring truth, to open our eyes, and to lead us deeper into his Spirit. You see, there are mysteries in God that are too great for human language, and yet too often we reduce the holy gift of tongues into noise, into formality, into a display. But Jesus whispered to me, it is more than words. It is more than sound. It is my Spirit communing with your spirit. If your heart is open today, if your spirit is hungry, I tell you, by the end of this message, you will not look at speaking in tongues the same way again. You will see that it is not for performance, not for pride, not for confusion, but for power, for intimacy, and for transformation in your walk with God. So I ask you, do not close your ears, do not harden your heart. Listen with the Spirit, because the Lord has something to reveal to you today. My beloved brothers and sisters, when Jesus revealed to me that speaking in tongues is not what many of us have thought, my heart was shaken. You see, for so long we have treated tongues like a ritual, something mechanical, something that we can learn by imitation or repeat, as if it is a formula. But Jesus said, it is not ritual, it is revelation. What he meant is that the very essence of speaking in tongues is not about what comes out of our mouth, but about what God pours into our spirit. Think for a moment. When a child speaks for the first time, do we rejoice because of the sound? Or do we rejoice because it is proof that life is growing, that relationship is forming? In the same way, tongues are not given to us as empty sounds. They are signs of a living relationship, proof of a divine connection that cannot be measured by earthly understanding. Yet how often have we reduced it to a practice, to something we can force or manufacture? When this happens, it loses its life, and instead of drawing people to God, it confuses them. But when tongues are received as revelation, they become rivers of living water flowing from the innermost being. I remember one night, while praying in the early hours, the Spirit came upon me with a heaviness I could not explain. I began to groan, not with words I understood, but with cries from deep within. Later, Jesus said to me, do you see? That was not ritual. That was revelation. My Spirit was interceding through you with groanings too deep for words. Brothers and sisters, this is the heart of tongues. It is God revealing himself through us, praying through us, working through us, so that his will may be done on earth as it is in heaven. When we look at the book of Acts, the disciples did not wait for tongues to practice a tradition. They waited for power. They waited for the promised Spirit. And when the Spirit came, tongues came as fire, as revelation, as evidence that heaven had invaded earth. It was not a ritual they learned in the synagogue. It was an eruption of heaven's language through ordinary men and women. This is why we must understand the gift is not about performance. It is about receiving something that could never be produced by the human mind. Some people ask me, Pastor, why do I not feel power when I speak in tongues? And I tell them gently, because tongues are not magic words. They are revelation. If your heart is closed, you may have the sound, but not the Spirit. If your mind is distracted, you may have the form, but not the fire. Tongues without revelation are like an empty lamp without oil. It looks like a lamp, but it cannot shine. But when the Spirit fills the lamp, when revelation flows, then even the simplest sound carries heaven's fire. Even the weakest voice carries heaven's authority. Let me explain this more deeply. Revelation means something hidden is uncovered. Something unseen is brought into the light. When you speak in tongues, it is not your mind constructing sentences. It is the Spirit revealing mysteries from heaven, mysteries that bypass your limited understanding. Paul said, "One who speaks in a tongue does not speak to men but to God, for no one understands him. However, in the Spirit he speaks mysteries." Do you see? It is not ritual, it is revelation. You may not understand what you are saying, but in that very moment, the Spirit is revealing, interceding, and aligning you with the will of God. This is why the enemy attacks tongues so fiercely. Because if he can convince the church that tongues are just noise, just ritual, just fanaticism, then he can rob us of one of the greatest channels of revelation. He knows that when a believer prays in tongues with faith, secrets of heaven are being released, chains are being broken, futures are being aligned, destinies are being set in motion. The devil trembles not at the sound of tongues, but at the revelation behind them. Let me tell you a story. A young woman once came to me weeping. She said, "Pastor, I have been praying in tongues for years, but I feel nothing. I fear it is empty." I prayed for her, and the Spirit said, "Tell her to stop looking for a feeling and start listening for a revelation." So I told her, "Do not focus on how you feel. Ask the Spirit to reveal what He is doing." The next week she returned with tears of joy. She said, "As I prayed in tongues, I suddenly knew in my spirit that God was healing my family. I saw peace where there had been war. I saw restoration where there had been division." She had received revelation and it changed her life. Brothers and sisters, tongues are not ritual. They are heaven breaking into earth. They are Jesus interceding through you. They are the Spirit of God unveiling mysteries, shifting atmospheres, and releasing power. You do not need to understand every syllable, because it is not your mind that is working, it is your spirit that is receiving. The question is not whether you can produce tongues, but whether you can yield to revelation. So today I urge you, do not cheapen this holy gift into a ritual. Do not reduce it to something you practice without thought. Instead, open your heart and say, "Lord, let your Spirit reveal through me. Let my tongue become a vessel of heaven's mysteries. Let revelation flow, not from my head, but from your Spirit." And when you pray like that, you will see that every word, every sound carries weight, carries power, carries the breath of God Himself. My friends, tongues are not ritual, they are revelation. And when you embrace them as revelation, you step into a dimension of prayer that shakes the earth and touches heaven. Brothers and sisters, when Jesus showed me that speaking in tongues is not what we think, He took me deeper into another truth. He said, "The true power of tongues is not in the sound, but in the Spirit." Oh, how we have misunderstood this. Many of us have become fascinated with the noise, the syllables, the strange sounds that flow from the mouth. But the Lord made it clear, it is not about sound, it is about spirit. Think about this. A drum can make a loud noise, but that does not mean it carries the breath of heaven. A trumpet can blast through the air, but unless the Spirit fills it, it is just sound in the atmosphere. In the same way, tongues without Spirit are nothing more than noise. But when the Spirit breathes through your tongue, even the softest whisper becomes a weapon. Even the faintest syllable carries the power of heaven. Some people believe that speaking in tongues is impressive because it sounds mysterious. But mystery without Spirit is empty. I have heard gatherings where people all shouted in tongues at once, yet I could sense no life, no presence, no movement of God. And then I have been in a quiet room where just one old woman whispered in tongues, and the power of God shook the place. Why? Because the difference was spirit. The Spirit makes the sound alive. The Spirit turns noise into intercession, syllables into revelation, utterance into fire. Paul wrote, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal." What was he saying? Without Spirit, tongues become empty, like metal clashing together. But when the Spirit is present, tongues are not just sounds, they are divine communion. Heaven and earth touching through your very being. Let me share what the Lord showed me one night while I was praying. I was weary and discouraged. I began to pray in tongues, but at first it was only sound. My lips moved, but my heart felt dry. Then I cried out, "Lord, breathe on me." And suddenly I felt a river rise inside. The same tongue, the same sound, but now it was Spirit. And as the Spirit took over, I felt strength enter my bones, light fill my mind, and peace surround my heart. It was not the sound that changed me, it was the Spirit. The sound was the vessel, the Spirit was the power. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "It is spirit over sound." Too many believers chase the sound. They think if it is loud, it is powerful. They think if it is long, it is effective. But God is not impressed by volume or length. He looks for spirit. He listens for faith. He responds to hearts surrendered, not tongues performed. That is why a broken whisper in tongues, uttered in deep dependence on God, can move mountains more than hours of empty repetition. My beloved, do not confuse emotion with spirit. Emotion rises and falls like waves, but spirit is eternal. You may cry when you pray in tongues, or you may feel nothing at all. But if the Spirit is behind it, whether with tears or with silence, the prayer is powerful. Too many think they must feel goosebumps or see visions for tongues to be real. But Jesus said, "Blessed are those who believe without seeing." The Spirit works beyond feelings, beyond emotions, beyond sound. I once met a man who told me, "Pastor, I stopped speaking in tongues because I did not feel anything anymore." I asked him, "Did you stop eating food when you no longer felt excited to eat? Did you stop breathing air when it became ordinary?" Of course not. Food still nourishes, air still sustains, even when you feel nothing. Tongues, when led by the Spirit, still carry power even when you feel nothing. Because it is not about the sound, it is about the Spirit. The Spirit never weakens. The Spirit never tires. The Spirit never loses his power. When the Spirit moves, tongues become a lifeline between heaven and earth. The sound itself may mean nothing to your mind, but in the Spirit it carries mysteries. It carries intercession. It carries divine authority. Paul said, "The Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words." Notice, it is the Spirit himself, not your ability, not your sound. The Spirit takes over, and your tongue becomes his instrument. That is the power. And so I urge you, do not focus on how your tongues sound. Do not compare your sound with another sound. Some tongues sound sharp, some sound soft. Some roll like rivers, others break like groans. But none of that matters. What matters is the Spirit. The Spirit turns your ordinary voice into a heavenly instrument. The Spirit fills your breath with divine purpose. The Spirit makes your prayer reach the throne of God. When we realize this, pride disappears. We no longer boast. I can speak in tongues for hours. We no longer compare. My tongues sound more fluent than yours, because we understand it is not us, it is the Spirit. And when humility fills us, the Spirit flows even stronger, because he resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Brothers and sisters, let us not be deceived by the sound. Let us not settle for noise without Spirit. Instead, Let us yield ourselves fully to the Spirit and say, Lord, breathe through me. Make my tongue your instrument. Let every sound carry your life. And when we pray this way, then tongues will no longer be empty syllables, but rivers of power, fountains of revelation, weapons of warfare, songs of the Spirit. So I tell you again, it is not the sound that matters, it is the Spirit. Sound may reach the ears of men, but Spirit reaches the heart of God. And when the Spirit speaks through you, even in words you do not understand, all of heaven moves on your behalf. Beloved brothers and sisters, when Jesus continued to open my eyes about speaking in tongues, he showed me something very important. He said, tongues were never given for exhibition, they were given for edification. Oh, how this pierced my heart, because too often we in the church have turned tongues into a display, a badge of spirituality, a mark of who is higher or deeper. But the Lord said, this gift was not given to puff you up, it was given to build you up. Do you see the difference? Exhibition is when something is shown to impress others, but edification is when something is used to strengthen, to encourage, to nourish. Exhibition seeks attention, edification seeks transformation. Jesus never gave us tongues to prove that we are more spiritual than others. He gave us tongues to strengthen our weak hearts, to build our faith, and to draw us closer to Him. The Apostle Paul addressed this very issue with the Corinthians. They were using tongues as a display. They were speaking loudly in public, trying to show how spiritual they were, but there was no love, no understanding, no purpose. And Paul said, the one who speaks in tongues edifies himself. In other words, it is meant to build up your inner man, not to impress the crowd. He did not say, the one who speaks in tongues becomes a showpiece. He said, he is strengthened in his spirit. One night in prayer, I asked the Lord, why do so many people misunderstand this gift? And He answered, because they are looking at the gift through the eyes of man, not the eyes of God. Man looks for a stage, man looks for applause, man looks for recognition, but God looks at the heart. And tongues, when rightly understood, are God's way of lifting your heart, strengthening your faith, and filling you with His Spirit until you overflow. Think of it this way. When you are weak, you need strength. When you are tired, you need rest. When you are empty, you need filling. Tongues are like a divine exercise for the inner man. They strengthen what is weak. They energize what is tired. They fill what is empty. That is why Paul said, I thank God that I speak in tongues more than you all. He was not boasting. He was revealing the secret of his strength. Paul endured prison, persecution, hunger, shipwreck, rejection, yet he kept going. Why? Because he was constantly being edified in the Spirit. He knew tongues were not for show, they were for survival, for strength, for endurance in the calling of God. But when people misuse this gift as an exhibition, it loses its power. Instead of lifting others, it confuses them. Instead of glorifying God, it glorifies the person. And when pride enters, the Spirit withdraws, because the Spirit does not share His glory with human pride. That is why we must always remember, tongues are not a stage for performance. They are a secret place for intimacy. I remember once a young man came to me and said, Pastor, I want to speak in tongues in front of everyone so that they will know I am spiritual. And I looked at him with love and said, my son, tongues are not proof of your spirituality. The fruit of the Spirit is proof of your spirituality. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Tongues are given to edify you so that you can live out that fruit. He was silent and tears came to his eyes. He realized he was chasing exhibition, not edification. And how many of us, if we are honest, have done the same. We want others to see, to hear, to recognize. But brothers and sisters, the Lord sees your heart. He knows when you pray in tongues in your closet, with no one watching, with no one listening. He knows when your tears flow as your spirit cries out to Him in words you do not understand. That kind of prayer carries more weight in heaven than the loudest public display. Because in secret, there is no exhibition, only edification. Jesus reminded me of His own teaching. When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Tongues are most powerful in that secret place. You may feel weak, but as you pray in tongues, your spirit grows strong. You may feel empty, but as you pray, rivers of living water begin to flow. You may feel surrounded by darkness, but as you pray, the light of God fills your soul. So I ask you, my beloved, why would we exchange such a powerful gift for mere exhibition? Why would we trade intimacy with God for the applause of men? Do not let tongues become a show. Do not let it be about who hears you, who notices you, or who applauds you. Let it be about who strengthens you. Your Father in heaven. When you understand this, everything changes. You will no longer measure tongues by volume, by length, or by how dramatic they sound. You will measure them by the strength they bring, the peace they release, the intimacy they create with Jesus. And you will see that every time you yield your tongue to the Spirit, you are being built up, brick by brick, into a temple of the living God. Brothers and sisters, edification is the purpose. God is not impressed with exhibition. He does not need a show. What He desires is a vessel He can fill, a spirit He can strengthen, a child He can draw close. This is why tongues were given, not for pride, not for performance, but for power and intimacy with Him. So let us return to the true purpose of this gift. Let us humble ourselves, and in secret, let us pray in tongues until our inner man is lifted, until our faith is unshakable, until our hearts are full of love. Because this is what tongues were meant to do, edify, not exhibit. Brothers and sisters, after the Lord showed me that tongues are not ritual, but revelation, not sound but spirit, not exhibition but edification, He led me into one final truth. He said, tongues are given for purpose, not confusion. Oh, how necessary this word is for the church today. For too long, this gift has been surrounded by arguments, by division, by misunderstanding. Some say it is foolishness, some say it is unnecessary, some even say it is dangerous. But Jesus whispered to me, it is none of these things, it is purpose. I gave tongues not to divide, but to align, not to confuse, but to bring my people into harmony with my spirit. Think about it. Our God is not the author of confusion. He does not give gifts to scatter His children, but to gather them into His will. Yet how many have turned this precious gift into a point of debate? Instead of seeking its purpose, we quarrel over its place. Instead of receiving its blessing, we resist it out of fear. But if we look through the eyes of Jesus, we will see that tongues have always been about purpose. What is that purpose? It is to align the believer with the will of God. The Bible tells us that we do not know how to pray as we ought. Our words are limited. Our understanding is small. But when we pray in tongues, the Spirit intercedes for us according to the will of God. Do you see the beauty in this? Tongues take us beyond our weakness, beyond our ignorance, beyond our limitations, and carry us into the very heart of God's purpose. When you pray in your own language, you pray from your mind. You ask for what you see, what you feel, what you think you need. But when you pray in tongues, you step out of your mind and into the Spirit. Suddenly, you are praying for things you cannot see, for breakthroughs you cannot imagine, for victories you do not even know you need. That is the purpose. It is not to confuse you, it is to position you in God's perfect will. I remember one season in my life when I felt completely lost. I did not know which direction to take. I did not know what decision to make. Every option seemed unclear. So I went before the Lord and I prayed in tongues for hours, not knowing what I was saying, but trusting the Spirit. And then suddenly, like a light in the darkness, clarity came. My spirit was aligned with God's will, and I knew the step I had to take. Later, I realized that while my mind was confused, my spirit had been praying the solution all along. That is the purpose of tongues: to bring clarity where there is confusion, to bring alignment where there is disorder, to bring divine purpose where human reasoning fails. This is why the enemy tries to surround tongues with confusion, because he knows if believers discover their true purpose, they will be unstoppable. He tries to make it controversial so that people avoid it. He tries to make it look foolish so that people despise it. But if you can look past the noise and grasp the purpose, you will find one of the greatest treasures of the Spirit. Brothers and sisters, do not let confusion steal from you what God intended for your strength. When you yield your tongue to the Spirit, you may not understand the words, but heaven understands. You may not grasp the meaning, but God's will is being established. And often, in time, you will see the fruit. You will realize that while you prayed in tongues, God was preparing the answer. God was aligning the path. God was working all things for your good. Tongues also bring unity in the Spirit. On the day of Pentecost, when the Spirit came upon the disciples, they spoke in tongues, and the nations heard the wonders of God in their own languages. This was not confusion, it was clarity. It was God showing that His gospel was for every nation, every tongue, every tribe. What men called confusion, God called revelation. What men thought was strange, God used as a sign that His Spirit was breaking boundaries and uniting His people. Today, we must return to that understanding. Tongues are not given to divide us into camps of those who speak and those who do not. They are given to remind us that the Spirit has no boundaries, that His purpose is greater than our understanding, that His will is bigger than our language. When you pray in tongues, you are stepping into a stream that flows from eternity. You are joining your weak voice to the eternal voice of the Spirit. And in that place, confusion disappears and purpose reigns. The Lord also showed me that many believers struggle because they try to understand tongues with the mind. But tongues are not meant for the mind, they are meant for the Spirit. Paul said, "If I pray in a tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is unfruitful." This means your mind may not grasp it, but your spirit is active, your spirit is alive. Your spirit is being built up in God's purpose. And if you trust the Spirit, you will see the fruit of those prayers in your life. So do not despise what you do not understand. Do not reject what seems strange. Instead, ask the Lord, "What is the purpose?" And He will show you. He will show you that tongues bring you into alignment with His will, that they open doors you cannot open, that they release strength you cannot produce, that they carry you into prayers beyond your imagination. My beloved, tongues are not confusion. They are purpose. They are God's way of making weak men strong, of making lost men found, of making powerless men powerful. They are the Spirit's tool to bring your life into harmony with heaven. And when you pray in tongues with faith, you are not wandering in confusion. You are standing in the very center of God's will,